Again, and just to repeat myself, good evening, members, and welcome to the Odeon Scrutiny meeting. First of all, if I could just go through the agenda items. First of all, the minutes of the last meeting. It was on the 14th of November 2023. Is it your wish that I sign those as a true and accurate record? Right. Do we have any apologies, Carol?
Yes, I've received apologies from councillors Chapman, Bond, Brindle, Cope and Kay Williams.
Thank you. Do we have any more from the floor, please? Any further apologies? No? Okay, we'll move on then. Item 3, declarations of interest. Does anybody have a declaration of interest? Councillor Perry.
In relation to item 9 for future waste recycling provision, obviously working for BRE, I will make my exit at that point.
Okay, I hope members remind me to invite him to come back in again. Moving on to item 4, the Council's medium-term financial strategy 2024-25 and more. And therefore, can I ask Councillor Rees to present this, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, members. I would like to introduce the budget from the MTFS, if I can get the letters right. As part of our ongoing budget planning process, members have been engaged and cited on early budget considerations. So tonight's presentation by the Director of Finance will be very familiar and will give you a further opportunity to review the budget proposals, which set the draft budget and the MTFS for the period 24-25 to 28-29. The budget will then pass to full council on the 20th of February for final approval, taking into account any amendments that may be necessary following feedback from the consultation period. Main recommendation to draw your attention to are for the council to agree an increase in council tax by £5 and to make use of 1.5 million of the General Reserve Fund to balance the budget in 24-25. The proposed budget shows a 3-year balanced budget, which is achieved using General Fund reserves until 26-27. The budget allows us to maintain the General Fund reserves position above the agreed minimum of 1.5 million until 27-28. As always, a number of assumptions have been made. The budget, and these continue to be uncertain due to the lack of clarity around if and when funding reforms for local authorities will be implemented. However, we must make prudent assumptions using the best available information and advice that is currently available. The recommendations are 2.1 A, B, C, D and E, but in the meantime, our Director of Finance will now take you through the report in more detail, after which he will give you the opportunity to ask any questions you may have. Over to you.
Thank you, Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. As the Leader mentioned, the report sets out a balanced budget for the next 3 years until the end of 26-27. And this is achieved through the use of General Fund reserves, but means we are able to maintain our General Fund balance above the agreed minimum level of 1.5 million until that point. I appreciate that it is a complicated report, although we have been through a number of elements of it a number of times. So I'll try and take you through the sections of the report as slowly as I can and highlight the important parts to bring to your attention. So section 4, starting on page 4 of your pack, sets out the background to the MTFS with paragraph 4.2 explaining the pertinent points that came out of the policy statement and the provisional financial settlement. The main area of uncertainty, which was confirmed as part of those, was that the new homes bonus would continue for 1 more year into 24-25. The provisional settlement didn't contain any information on future local government finance or any information on future funding reform. So there continues to be uncertainty and potential volatility in the budget moving forward. We also continue to see the impact of the cost of living crisis, and also our low council tax base limits our ability to increase funding significantly through that funding source. As a result, business rates continues to be our biggest funding source, along with being the most volatile and uncertain area in local government finance at the moment. Section 6 then summarises the current MTFS position, with table 1 showing the MTFS for 24-25 to 28-29, and table 2 showing the corresponding impact on general fund reserves. You can see from table 1 that our use of general fund reserves is relatively stable in the first 2 years, ranging between £1.2 and £1.5 million, but then increases up to £2.8 million in 26-27, and the reason for that is because that's when we are assuming at the moment that the business rates reset and funding reform will happen. As a result of this, we are planning to use our collection fund reserve in that year to reduce the impact on general fund reserves. So we are projecting, as you can see from table 2, that general fund reserves will fall below the minimum level of £1.5 million during 27-28, but that means we have 3 years to plan how to address this. The detailed MTFS breakdown can be found in Appendix 1 of your packs. Paragraph 6.4 then sets out the key assumptions that we have used in setting the budget and the MTFS over the next 3 to 5 years. So pay award has been assumed at 4.5% for next year, 3% for 25-26 and 2% thereafter. Council tax we have assumed will be increased by £5 each year. General inflationary increases we have assumed of 4.6% in 24-25 and then 2% after that. As I've just mentioned, we are currently assuming the business rates reset will happen in 26-27, and we have also assumed transitional protection of 50% in the first year and 25% in the second year. And that's a local assumption in the absence of any information from central government at the moment. And then lastly, we are assuming increased business rates from 27-28 coming through from new developments such as the West Midlands interchange. Then table 3 reconciles the MTFS that was last presented to you and formally approved in February 2023 to the current MTFS. So you can see all of the changes that have happened between those two different budgets. There are notes below that table for against each of the items in the table, and Appendix 2 sets out in detail the resource planning and prioritisation, or RPP, items and the business as usual items in more detail. And so, as an example, some of the more significant items that you'll be aware of that we've discussed previously in there is the reprofiling of some of our commercial rent income, an increase in the charge for garden permits, and an increase in our projected planning income. Section 7 then goes on to explain the council tax income that has been assumed in the budget and the assumptions included within there. And then on to section 8, which is business rates. And as I've mentioned, this is our biggest source of funding and our biggest area of uncertainty at the moment. So this section does provide more information on the assumptions that we've made, particularly around the business rates reset and also future growth in business rates. One thing to draw to your attention around this area is that a potential technical issue has arisen in recent days in the calculation of the estimated Section 31 grants that are included in the budget. These are grants that are received from the government to compensate the council for any government decisions that result in a loss of business rates income. We don't currently have a figure for this, as the issue has only been identified in the last few days. Any implications from this will be notified to members and built into the final budget that is presented to full council for approval, but I can assure members that this will not materially impact on the general fund reserves presented in the MTFS. Section 9 then provides some sensitivity analysis in a couple of areas, one around business rates and two around commercial income. Table 6 shows optimistic and pessimistic scenarios compared to the current MTFS assumptions around business rates. And you can see from that table the impact on the general fund reserves of those different scenarios and those different assumptions. And so it does show how volatile business rates can be. Table 7 then shows a similar a demonstration of what an optimistic assumption and pessimistic assumption would mean in terms of our commercial income. And you can see from that table that our commercial income is far less susceptible to changes in those assumptions. The market for new commercial investments at the moment is more difficult because interest rates are still high. So in order for a commercial investment to be worthwhile, it has to be able to generate more than the interest we're able to generate with the money in the bank at the moment. However, we do continue to appraise both development and acquisition opportunities and progress with business cases where a return on investment is demonstrated. As an example of this, in 2024, the council will purchase a factory site of 4 Ashes, which delivers both a return on investment, but also secures a tenant for Unit 4E. It also frees up 3 smaller council-owned commercial units for growing businesses. The acquisition also brings new jobs into the district, reduces the risk of a void period on Unit 4E and generates business rates income. So you can see there where that acquisition stacks up as something that is worthwhile the council pursuing. Section 10 then sets out a summary of the capital programme, and the full programme can be found in Appendix 3 on page 19 of your packs. You will recall that we have included 3 new projects in the capital programme as a result of the RPP process, relating to car park refurbishments, replacement of leisure equipment and replacement of street seen vehicles. Then section 11 explains our current earmarked reserves position, and it is estimated that these will increase from 6.996 million up to 7.331 million by the end of 23-24. Appendix C then also provides further detail. Appendix 6 even, also provides further detail on this area. And then section 12 highlights some of the main risks in the current MTFS and the mitigations around those risks. And as you can see, referring back to business rates, they are included in a number of those risks due to the volatility and uncertainty around that area at the moment. And then lastly, section 13 is the conclusion, which states that the budget is judged to be prudent and deliverable in what is a continued period of uncertainty for local government. That summarises the report, and I'll hand you back to the chairman.
Thank you, Bex. That was very comprehensive. I presume it's quite a long read if you've been through it. But now's the time. Does anybody have any questions, please? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, and thanks for going through that. You won't be surprised to hear that when I read it, it was the business rates that attracted my attention straight away, which is obviously a major source of risk. So, I mean, the first thing is that I note in table 11 on the 12.3, the mitigations, as it were, you've again stressed that you think mitigation is it's highly unlikely that with the impending election, it's going to change ahead of the time you're predicting. But I guess in theory, it could do. So I'm not really sure that it's unlikely to happen as a mitigation. It just, if it happens, it happens. The mitigations underneath that, which seem fine. But given that the current leader in the polls, Labour Party, I think it was late as November of last year, committed firmly to doing away with business rates and seemed to be very, very keen on doing that as a matter of urgency. I mean, are we absolutely as sure as we can be that they're not going to do it earlier and spring it on us? I appreciate that would cause chaos, I guess, for most councils, but it's a possibility, I guess. And the other one is, do we have any sense, and I've not managed to dig it out, as to what they may be putting there in its stead and how that may affect us? Thanks.
Yeah, in terms of the likelihood, I think it's probably even more unlikely now that they could put anything in place for 25, 26. The reason for that is because there would need to be quite a lengthy consultation with the local authorities on that. And in terms of a general election, I just don't think there would be the time available once a general election had happened for that consultation to take place, and then for anything to be fed into the settlement by December. So I just don't think that's going to happen. However, I mean, and also to answer your second question, no, we don't have a clue. Years and years ago, they talked about this and they started to announce some potential changes, but that's all fallen away now. But on the other side of it, we do hold an earmarked reserve to protect us against volatility. So really, that is the mitigation. But as I say, really, the thing for me is it's not going to happen for 25, 26.
Thank you, Beck. Any further questions? Yes, Alan.
Thank you. I'm just anticipating in here that the debt levels run higher, both with business rates and household rates, due to the increasing cost of living, which, as we know, is quite volatile at the moment, and that wages are increasing, not rising in accord with the cost of living. Assuming that, and we have a very good collection rate at the moment, if that dipped to something like 90%, how much difficulty is that in making the budget balance?
Yeah, that would have a significant impact. I don't have the figures to hand, but I could come back to you with figures on that at the moment. But I did actually have a meeting with the revenues team earlier today, and there has been a slight drop in the collection rates, both in business rates and council tax, as you would expect, but not significant enough to drop down to that sort of level. The other thing to note is that we will obviously set aside a bad debts provision for both council tax and business rates. And so as part of that, setting that provision and setting the budget for next year, we will look at those provisions and make sure that they are robust and they are at a reasonable level based on the collection rates. If you want me to come back to you with any figures around that, I can have a look at that for you outside of the meeting.
Thank you. Yes, I'd be grateful for those figures. I think I'm looking at increasing use of food banks in our localities as an indicator for the levels of poverty. And I think we need to be watching those quite carefully at the moment. Can I ask a further question, please? I noticed there's a reduction predicted in, I think it's crematorium fees, and is that an increase in burials rather than crematorium fees, or do you have any information about that, please? Should we ask in the relevant officer, probably?
We entered into an agreement, but actually there has been a delay in the crematorium actually coming onto line. So there was an issue in terms of the timing. We'd originally predicted the contract overran, which is a westerly run contract. But that income now, we are looking at the projections in terms of those incomes. So we've just tried to reflect what we believe to be the reality. So it's not about the burials, it's actually a tri-party agreement we've got with an external company, the Broad Lane site.
This is for you, Jackie, probably as well. Our recycling credits have gone down, obviously, from the county council. Is there any possibility before we enter the next contract of those right being more? Is there anything else that we can do about that?
In terms of through the statutory partnership, there are ongoing conversations about credit levels between districts and the county. Those conversations will continue. Later on the agenda, Mark will obviously be doing a presentation around the waste contract, and that will form part of that consideration. Certainly, we would want to be in a very clear position what the future is around those credits before we actually go to the marketplace with the contract.
Do we have any further questions?
Just want to make a comment to say thank you to you for the way this has been presented. It's a very full report and very interesting, and certainly something when we get to the next election where we have to watch this very carefully, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simon. Right, members, do we have any further questions? No? Does anybody wish to debate it? No? Well, in that case, if I can get my screen back up, there is a recommendation. Oh, well, thank you. Right, the recommendation at item 2 is, and I'm going to read them now because this is important. 2.1 it is recommended that members scrutinise proposals, in particular, A, members support this report together with the draft medium-term financial strategy, revenue estimates and capital programme for the 2024-25 budget for consultation with stakeholders, in particular. B, members note the update draft of the MTFS position and revised revenue estimates for 2023-24 and 2024-25. Members note the reconciliation for the previously approved MTFS to be updated draft MTFS. Members support the revised capital programme. Members support that the minimum level of general reserve funds is maintained at 1.5 million. Finally, members note that the leader of the council be authorised to make any necessary amendments to include any late information or to correct any errors or omissions. Are we all content with that, please? Thank you. Right, moving on now, we move on to the UK Shared Prosperity Fund and Rural England Prosperity Fund report of the Assistant Director's Enterprise and Growth. However, I think Councillor Wilson wishes to present this.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. As we've previously committed to undertaking, I'm really pleased to bring members the 6-monthly progress update on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So members will be aware that we received an allocation of 3.82 million from government in 2022 across 3 financial years from 2022 to 2023 and then 2024 to 2025 to be spent on our local priorities agreed through an investment plan and based around 3 key investment priorities, and those were if you recall, people and skills, supporting local business and communities in place. In addition, we also received a further £489,000 of Rural England Prosperity funding for capital grants for small businesses and for community infrastructure. And this fund runs from 23-24 to 24-25. When we previously updated the committee last July, as I'm sure you'll all remember, the initial focus of the programme had been on setting up the background activities to enable us to safely deliver the programme to meet the government's funding guidelines. And since then, I'm pleased to be able to say that the focus has now moved on to the delivery stage of the programme and to the difference that the funding is going to make to our communities and to our businesses. So I'm now going to hand over to Grant, and he's going to provide you with an update on the progress over the last 6 months.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson, and good evening, members. I intend to start around 3.8 of the report. I think Councillor Wilson's kindly given you the context of it, and we've set out a bit of background regarding the funding if folk had forgotten. So just moving on to an update on the people and skills side of it. And what we are running this through is, I suppose, a brand called Creating Brighter Futures programme, and it provides assistance to our residents who are long-term unemployed and furthest from the job market, as well as opportunities for reskilling and upskilling. Some of you will be aware that we previously had access to an EU-funded programme called Building Better Opportunities, which ceased at the end of March last year, and that was really targeting those furthest from the job market to get them skilled and into work, or at least get them work ready. And what this funding has enabled us to do is to roll over that part of the programme into this year and continue the good work that was actually doing. But it's also allowed us to expand the activities that the Creating Brighter Futures team are looking at, and we're also looking at now some of that sort of reskilling and upskilling work for those that are either recently unemployed or potentially want to upskill to better jobs, to potentially some of the jobs that are heading to the district in the not too distant future. Appendix A sets out their progress to date. I think what you can probably see in that is that in the sort of year or so that the programme's been running, there's some really strong performance in some parts of the programme around the outputs and outcomes, and those outputs and outcomes are prescribed to us by government. So we report back on those outputs and outcomes. In some areas are very strong, some areas not so strong. And I suppose the focus for the Creating Brighter Futures team at the moment is to try and get those areas that are underperforming at the moment up and running. And I think broadly, I would say that those areas where we had a standing start last April are probably those that are taking longer to get the progress on. The areas where it was a continuation of the Building Better Opportunities programme, it won't surprise you that those are the areas that we're performing higher on, because we were just unable to continue the activities that we started prior to that. I think one of the things that we are very conscious of with the government's outputs and outcomes is they're very numerically driven. So they're very, how many businesses have done that? How many people have you got through these sort of programs? So we are looking at the moment of how we can introduce some of our own indicators that are a bit more around the quality. So what difference has that program made to people? The so what type of conversations, and we're working on that so that we can potentially bring back some, I'll call them softer outcomes to members in future reports, rather than the hard metrics of so many people have been through this program, or we've got so many people into work. And that is important, but I think it's just a little bit more of the softer stuff is particularly good, because there's potentially some really good stories and big difference that money is making to people's lives. Moving on to the supporting local business side of it, this has probably been the single area where there's been the biggest difference since we last updated you back last summer. And during the last, I suppose, 6 to 7 months, we've been working to set up a number of different contracts to deliver different parts of the programme. What we're trying to do is develop programs that pick up different lifestyle parts of the lifestyle of a business. So you'll have spotted there that there's a startup programme. And we've got some great consultants, Good to Great, working with us, and that programme is now up and running, and they are delivering startup sessions for businesses, and there are grant programmes attached to that, so the businesses would go through the programme and then have the opportunity to apply for grants. We've got a number of programmes that we're working with the County Council on, some of a few of the other boroughs and districts. So the Get Started and Grow is probably picking up businesses that once they've actually started up, that first couple of years of their life cycle. And Growth Hub is offering bespoke advice around things like budgeting, HR, legal contracts for those quite early businesses that quite often, if you're a small business, are quite hard to you haven't necessarily got the capacity to get that information yourself. And our Green Solutions programme, which pretty much does what it says on the tin, is there to enable businesses to access advice about their energy and potentially get grants to help them make differences to reduce their energy usage. The Strive for Success programme we are delivering in-house, and that's probably the furthest along of the programmes here. We have been working We've had 2 cohorts of 20 businesses come through that, and some of the feedback has been really excellent from those businesses who have valued the workshops that they've been through, and there's now a grant scheme that's associated with that those businesses can apply for as well. And the one that we're just on the cusp of starting is a research and development innovation generator program, which is for those businesses that have either got new products, new services, new equipment that they want to move forward, and Staffordshire University will be delivering that program there. Many of you will be aware that we funded an appraisal of our village centres and high streets, and that study is just about to finish. We've seen some early drafts. We've commented on those drafts. The final version will be with us fairly shortly. And I think perhaps the more eagle-eyed will have spotted that hopefully something's gone into your inboxes today of a date where we were going to get the consultants to come back and talk to you about the study they've done and the findings that they've had, so you can get a better understanding of what that was. And then the final part on the supporting local businesses was we set aside some money for, I suppose it was almost like a pilot project on one of our enterprise parts around decarbonisation activities. And we're hopeful that the work at Landywood Enterprise Park will commence in the spring, which will involve installation of LED lighting, some PV panels on some of the units' roofs, and more insulated roller shutter doors. Moving on to the community in place element of the programme. Bit of a mixed bag on where we are with this, but I suppose the thing to say with this is, and hopefully you'll have noticed earlier in the report, the funding is tapered. So it started off quite low in year 3 of the programme, which will be starting in April. It increases massively. So most of the community place actions are in year 3. We've been gearing up for a lot of those. Warmer homes activity is one thing that we have been working on. I think one of the things with the funding is you've got the opportunity to try and match fund other projects or try and bring other funding sources into it to increase, I suppose, the scale of what we're doing. And we know that fairly recently the government have given additional funding to the county council for certain warmer homes activity. And what we've been able to do is to team up with them so that we've got a bigger pot and we can widen the criteria for the number of people that we can hit with that. The government funding is quite tightly defined, but if we can add to it, then we can broaden that criteria and potentially get some more people and benefit them for increasing and improving the warmth of their homes. As I've already said, the bulk of the funding is due in 24-25, but a number of the projects that we are looking at through those that year 3 funding is improvements to a number of open spaces across the district, and they're being worked up at the moment. One of the projects probably at a slightly earlier stage, but I think we are quite excited about these 2 projects is we've got the South Staffordshire Railway Walk in the south of the district and the Worley and Essington Canal in the north of the district, where there's some really good opportunities for improving those green spaces, increasing the usage, looking at more active travel options, so people cycling and being able to walk and run and various activities down there. So we have recently, and this is hot off the press, we've just commissioned some consultants to look at some feasibility work for those 2 projects, with a view that when we get the feedback from those, we'll look at more specific projects about what we want to do, because there is funding set aside in year 3 of this that is capital to potentially look at those improvements to that. The good thing with this as well, and this is another one where we're potentially going to try and lever in external funding. We are working with health colleagues and transport colleagues at the county council on these 2 projects, and there may be opportunities to pull other sources of funding in so we can try and do more than what we've got with just our UK SPF money. We have had, as I said, we have got the village appraisal that's just completing, and there is money set aside in year 3 of this, so that if there are any improvements to those village centres and high streets that are identified in the report, then potentially we've got some money set aside to help with those. And there's a number of tourism and visitor economy activities that we're looking at in year 3 as well. So that has an amount of the UK SPF is already allocated, but there is a residual amount that isn't. And last year, about the time we updated you, we launched the residual UK SPF funding open out to community organisations, to businesses who could bid into that. And we've had quite a lot of interest, but none have actually reached the stage. There's an assessment and evaluation panel that looks at any bids that come in. There's a combination of internal and external colleagues. And then there's a governance process to go through in terms of approving any applications. We have got a number of quite large projects coming through on that we hope over the next few weeks we'll be bringing forward for approval. And it'll be good to start getting some of that money out the door, but also to start being able to use it for some quite big projects that will hopefully to make a difference in some of those areas. In terms of the Rural England Prosperity Funding, this has moved forward quite a bit more than the residual amount, and there are to date 6 projects that have been approved for funding that are a variety of community and business projects, and that this particular fund is a capital fund for small grants to businesses and community organisations. And in 3.22 of the report, you can see that the 6 of those there. So there's a couple of those, Stoughton Village Hall and Spring Hill Cricket Club, have both applied for funding to install PV solar panels on the clubhouse roof or on the Village Hall roofs. There's a couple of business ones there for either bringing redundant farm buildings back into use or an extension to existing premises to increase product range. There's one there of conversion of an industrial space into more of a showroom. And there's another one there, which is a farm that's looking at some rural diversification projects of actually creating an educational facility on the farm to attract school children in to learn a little bit more about farming. So all of those bids have gone through and have been approved, subject some of them to planning. But broadly, I think we're on the verge of signing our first funding agreement for one of those. Hopefully fairly shortly we'll be able to give the money and they can get on and start doing the projects. I think Councillor Wilson said it, the first part of this programme has been very much getting it up and running, setting up all the infrastructure to enable us to deliver what is a quite significant funding programme from a standing start. And over the last few months, we've started to move into the delivery phase. Some of them, as you can see, have only been up and running a couple of months. Some of them probably about a week. So at the moment, there's not, other than the Creating Brighter Futures, there's not huge metrics to come and show you and show you how many have been through a number of these programmes, but we will be doing that moving forwards. And I've said we're all going to try and look at some different indicators that we're not necessarily having to report back to government, but actually would be quite useful, we think, for us as a council to show the difference that we're making with this particular funding. As of, well, for the first 2 years of the programme, as I say, the first 2 years of the programme have not had the biggest amounts of cash so far. So we've had 1.39 million from the government of that 3.8. As of the end of the as of the end of the calendar year, we'd spent about £250,000 that, which doesn't sound a huge amount, but hopefully you can start to see that as those projects ramp up over the next few months, the spend will increase significantly. And we're projecting that we think we'll probably spend 80% above of that 1.39 by the year end. So there's a lot of stuff to happen over the next few weeks to get some of that money out the door safely. But I suppose hopefully the assurance I can give to you is we're not paying anything out unless we've got contracts in place, we've gone through all the correct procurements and we've done everything properly. And now we've done a lot of that, we'll start to see that cash start rolling out the door and the programme start to deliver. I think it's probably worth pointing out at this stage that there's always that, it feels as though it's taken quite a while to get this thing up and running. But we do know that we speak to other local authorities. There's a Staffordshire group of UK SPF folk that have conversations, and I think every local authority has been in the same boat. We've all had a standing start, and we've all had to make sure that we're geared up to be able to deliver that. We have had some external support working with us, and that person is doing a similar sort of job in a number of other authorities in the area, and they pretty much confirmed back that experience is common across the country, that it's taken a while for people to get up and running, but we're all starting to hit the phase and stage now where things are starting to happen. And I spoke to them just before Christmas, and I think their view was that we're now properly on an upward trajectory on a lot of this sort of stuff. So we are now ahead of the curve with some of the other local authorities who are a little bit further behind us. So that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour. I'm happy to take any questions through you, Chairman, or through you, Councillor Wilson. Over to you.
Thank you, Grant. Do we have any questions? Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on the creating brighter futures. I know it's difficult talking about jobless because of the nature of the thing. They tend to get lower percentages when actually they're making a big impact. I was just interested in the location of some of those projects and what parishes that the activity is taking place in. Thank you.
It's a good question that I don't have the answer to, but it's one of those areas where we think we want to start getting a little digging under the figures a little bit, because you can look at a figure and it's district wide, and it may have made a very high impact in one area and none in another. So I think that's where we just need to start being a little bit more intelligent with some of the figures. So hopefully that's something we can bring to you at a later date.
Councillor Allen, thank you. You were first.
Thank you. Just briefly, I think in the budget, there's only about £1,000 in the tourism budget, which is not sufficient for this kind of programme. Is it envisaged to take some money from this budget and put it into the tourism budget for the authority? That's one question. The second question is really about green businesses and how we're encouraging them. And I wondered if it's possible, clearly this is a growth area, that when we're looking at our vacant units, whether any type of concession could be made to those who want to start or begin a green business, or whether they can be definitely encouraged into these workshops, obviously, which I heartily recommend. And my third question is really about the Princess Trust, and whether for young people who want to start a new business, whether that's being engaged. Thank you.
Okay, through you, Chairman. So the tourism side is, I think we've recognised that there's quite a lot we want to do, and we want to up our game a little bit on the tourism side, and this money gives us an opportunity, so it won't necessarily sit in the general fund side of it. But I think what it can do is fund some activities that we're looking to do on the tourism side of it, and which we're working through for year 3. We've recently had a new starter, and one of the elements of their new role will be to start looking at what we're doing on the high streets and the tourism side of it. So that is an area we will pick up. I suppose it's worth adding that there is other money in the budget that we pay into the Staffordshire, I can't remember what it's called, it used to be the Destination Management Partnership. So it's all the Staffordshire authorities and all the attractions working together to encourage people to come and visit. And Councillor Wilson is part of that group. And we pay in a sort of subscription to that as well. So there's, I suppose you get the economies of scale of promoting Staffordshire as a whole and our attractions within it. But yeah, absolutely, tourism is something that I think we recognise that we've got some fantastic natural and historic assets. This gives us an opportunity to increase some of the funding for encouraging more visitors into the district. The green business side is probably not necessarily UK SPF related. I think it might be something that might need a wider discussion as to whether we look at incentivising green businesses into our premises. I think that I might have to part of that one, and we may have to come back to you on that one, because unfortunately it's not something that I can necessarily pick up with this. But what we are trying to do, and have been promoting heavily with our businesses, is the Green Solutions Programme. So that gives them that opportunity to get some advice and then potentially cash to do some quite practical work around improving their energy efficiency. And this, you know, we're all householders and we know the impact it's had on our own internal budgets, and obviously it's a big fixed cost for a business that they can potentially try and, well, they've got the opportunity to do something about with that one as well. The Princess Trust, I don't think we've necessarily referred to it specifically, but I think we recognise it is out there, and the project manager for this would be recognising there are different funding sources out there. So I think one of the things we're really keen to do is if we can stretch it, then we could try to attract extra money in from other areas, and hopefully you've been able to recognise that from some of the things I've said. So if there's an opportunity that we can tap into that and look at startup activities for younger business startups, then great. So it's something we're aware of, although I don't necessarily think we've, having had a quick look on the website, I don't think we've necessarily referenced it, but it's just being aware of the different sources of funding.
Councillor Dusty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sorry, I've got my back to you, Grant. I'll look at you on the screen there when you come up. Grant, I'm just looking at Appendix A. This is about the creating brighter futures part of the funding. And just seeing if I'm understanding the numbers properly. So on Appendix 8, I'm on page 43. Does that document say that you were hoping to have 800 people involved in the project and you've got 222? Am I reading that correct? I've then got a supplementary question. So I'm assuming the target figures and the achieved figures are people, numbers of people.
That's correct, yes. So I suppose the thing to point out with some of these is it may be that there may be an element of double counting with some of this because some people may be going through different bits of support. So they may be actually in 2 or 3 of these lines. So I think that it is people. Yes, certainly the first page of that is people. Sorry, the second page is definitely people. Yeah, in fact, the first page is as well. So it's it says people, but I guess it's interventions. It's like some of them could be double counted.
So following up from that, if we look at the second page, one's eye is always drawn to the red boxes, isn't it? And the one that first jumped out to me was the number of people sustaining employment for 6 months. And that's one person, which is 5%, and your target's 20. And I was just interested in having a bit more of an understanding as to how that target's being proposed on the back of hoping to have 800 to just have 20 in employment for 6 months. And then why at this point there's only one person that's been successful. I'm just wondering what challenges might have been in place, or indeed what other interventions are in place for that figure to improve going forward. Thanks.
Okay, so it is over the lifetime of the programme, rather than, I suppose, the snapshot that you've got in front of you at the moment. I think the best answer I can say to this is it's a 6 month to somebody has to have been in work 6 months for you to be able to measure it. And the programme's been running since last April. So I think some of it is just that there haven't been enough people come through in a job for 6 months to be able to measure it. I think it's, whilst I'm not managing this particular project, I think it's probably fairly well known that if somebody has been out of work for a long time or struggled, then that first 6 months is absolutely critical. And that's probably where some of the other elements of this need to plug in around supporting that individual in those first 6 months in employment. So I think the target is low because it is quite intensive work for those people. But I suppose what I would hope is over the course of time, and as some of those 6 months, some of those people that have got in jobs have been in them 6 months, then this figure will be going up quite nicely. You would hope, given the other intensive support that's going in around it. But I think it's low at the moment because a lot of people haven't actually been in work 6 months to be able to measure whether they're still in that role. So I suppose the pithy answer will be watch this space on that one.
Thank you, Grant, because that actually answers the next supplementary question, which was clarification on paragraph 3.9, because I wasn't sure whether the employment was one of those activities that was building on the funding you'd had previously from Building Better Opportunities, but you've answered that saying that that's something that has actually just started with this new additional funding with creating brighter futures from April. So I can see that we're still quite on a tight timescale there. So thank you. I will watch this space with interest. Thank you.
Councillor Harper-Wallace.
Thank you. A lot of my questions got answered just then, but there is an additional one that I have off the back of that. So the programme started in April 2023, so it's been going up until now. And then within paragraph 3.9, we then are allocating 400,000 for another 2 more years. Within the table, it says that the targets are based on the next 2 years, but the program's been going for 3 years. So do those targets need to be adjusted by a third to account for the year that we've already had?
The vagaries of this fund was that it was a 3-year programme that we didn't get the funding announced until virtually all the way through year 1. So we didn't get the announcement of the funding until December 22. So as you can see, that's already 9 months through the first year of the programme. So, and as they still had the EU funding up until the end of March 23, this programme didn't start until April. So it's the financial year we're in and the financial year to come. So that's the 2 years. So it is slightly confusing on the funding because the funding didn't necessarily match the dates to which it was given for, which meant that, and we also then couldn't run two programs at the same time with EU funding and this particular program. So I accept it's not that clear, but unfortunately it was the hand we were dealt at the time, and obviously you couldn't run two particular sorts of funding at the same time.
That's great, thank you.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Will be a quick question. First of all, I thought this was some very good work that's been done. So congratulations to everyone involved, and particularly thanks on a personal level to those officers who've been involved in helping people get bids into these grants, especially for the REPF grant. My question is really, and it may be that I've missed something, so please feel free to make me look like an idiot and tell me that I have missed something. It's clearly it took you a while to get up and running, understandably, because of the issues that this is quite a big bit of grant allocations that you've got to do. And as you mentioned, you've had some external support as well, which I think is entirely appropriate given the scale of what's going on. And I was pleased to hear you were talking to other districts as well in how they were implementing it. But do we have a sense of how much the overhead has been of running these projects for the council?
Bonus of this funding is we could topslice 4% for running the fund. So we've employed a project officer, they're funded from that. And any of the day-to-day running is included as part of that. Clearly, the service areas that have got projects, it will probably fall within their service budgets, but actually a lot of the as you call it, the overheads have been covered by that top slice of admin fee.
Thanks. So it sounds as though some of it's just been absorbed into business as usual in effect to some extent. That's not a criticism, it's just an observation.
I think actually running the programme has been covered by that. I think what we have not done is put money into day-to-day budgets for this. So if any is going internally into service areas, it's for specific projects above and beyond day-to-day activities. So, for example, if we do fund some green spaces, green space improvements, it will not be the maintenance of those. It will be an upgrade on those. So, potentially additional planting or whatever. So I suppose it's the added value is what we've been looking at, not day-to-day activities.
I'm sorry, Councillor, have you moved position? You threw me? Yes, okay.
Just one very quick question. I was just looking at the progress interventions table. I'll declare a minor interest in this because I work in education. It just kind of piqued my interest, was around, obviously some of them are a little bit low in terms of like work experience and participation in education. It's not really a question about why that is at all. It's more about the kind of the geography of this, because obviously it's South Staffordshire District Council. Does it mean people can only access support to do this within South Staffordshire? Because obviously we think about the geography of the county. Some people look towards Stafford, some people look towards Stourbridge, some people look towards Wolverhampton. Does it mean they can go into those areas to find training and work experience, or is it just something they must do within the Shire, so to speak?
It's funding for our residents. I think if we can find opportunities, if they're not available in the district, and as you say, given the nature and the geography of the district, that might not always be possible, then I think the opportunity is probably there. But obviously the clear criteria has got to be, they've got to be a resident of South Staffordshire. And it might be, I'll use South Staffordshire College, for example. They've got campuses in four towns or four areas across the southern part of Staffordshire. So it might be that they have to go to Cannock or to Lichfield to do that. I think the important thing is they've got to be the resident, and then it's the right support to meet their needs, I guess.
Do we have any further questions? Oh, sorry. Yes. Hello.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That was really interesting presentation, but it's a bit of a specific question. So, which you may have answered in your presentation about community groups. Penkridge Parish Council put some expressions of interest in November quite quickly, because we advised we needed to put them in now so they would be approved or not, and then we put the further specific quotes in at the end of November. We've heard nothing since, but I'm presuming that are they going to be heard next year? We just didn't want to miss the boat. Thank you.
There is a sort of approval process for some of these grants that doesn't always necessarily click that you get it in and the next day you get an approval. So I will ask the question. I think what generally happens is you put your expression of interest in, then potentially there's a full application, you put your supporting information in, and then there's a panel, and then it sort of works its way through the system to get approvals. It's probably taking 2 months plus at the moment to get something, but I'll specifically ask the question about Penkridge, and it may be that we've had to go back and ask for extra information, or if you've not heard anything, I'll ask the question, I'll come back to you.
I just can you thank Gemma Amphlett, because she's very helpful in how she explained everything to me about the fund and what projects we could apply for. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very kind. I'll pass it on when I'm asking about the Penkridge ones tomorrow, so thank you.
Okay, members, any further questions? Any member wish to debate it? No, in that case, there is a recommendation at item 7. It is recommended that members note the contents of the UK Share Prosperity Fund and Rural England Prosperity Fund reports and the progress made to date. Are you all content with that, please? Okay, thank you. Moving on, we now on to item 6, which is the update on member working groups 2023-24. And this is an opportunity for chairman or vice chairman of those working groups if they wish to bring any news to this committee. No? Yes, Councillor Adams.
It would be rude not to say something about the community challenge group that we've been meeting. I've just made a few notes in as much as that if you can bottle enthusiasm, we have lots of it at our meetings, not only from the councillors, but also from the district staff. That's the Aspire team. They're coming with so much enthusiasm for the project they're working on. It was really good. They're working on the toolbox and a simple way to use it. Our brief was to actually have how we engage from parish councils, from district councils, from the county councils to get the best result, get people communicating with us. Now, we've had the meeting obviously to start with the Aspire team. We've also had a meeting now where we've had the county council officers who have been running a survey for some time. It finishes actually probably the end of this month, and they're going to present us with the reports from that. And at our next meeting, we've got parish councillors coming. What I would say is that we've come up with some really good ideas and that they're taking these on board, and hopefully we'll be able to present to you with a conclusion of what we've got in due course.
Okay, thank you for that. Any further comments? No? Okay, then there is a recommendation, and it's a very simple recommendation, is that members note the report. So thank you for that. Moving on to item 7, work programme 2023-24. I think this is Mrs. Fox.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Just very briefly, just to update you on the work programme, the only changes in respect of what should have been on the agenda tonight is a update report on the Disabled Facilities Grant. Due to a timing issue, that will now come to your March meeting, but is in progress and will definitely come to your next meeting. And then the local plan, and members will be aware that a number of emails have gone out recently regarding briefing sessions around the local plan. That will come formally to overview and scrutiny. It is likely we'll have an additional date for that to come forward rather than wait for the 12th of March meeting, but that will all be confirmed out to members shortly.
Thank you, members. Any questions, please? Councillor Allen.
Probably due to my absence, but many emails have come through about future meetings. It would be really helpful if you have a table of those, please. I think those of us have got the ability to drive at the moment, so to be able to schedule things, I need to be pretty aware of what's taking place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? No. Again, there's a recommendation, and that is really that the members note the report. You all content with that? Thank you. Right, moving on to item 8, the exclusion of the press and public. I so move that the press and public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following items on the ground that they are likely to involve disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 and 5 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act of 1972.
I'll have to second that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Yeah, are the members content with that, please? Thank you. Moving on to item